Suellen we have online, and Lucy we have in class. So I hope you had a great weekend and you're ready to get back into learning English together. So this week we're going to be talking about one of the grammar. It's called the present perfect. It's a really hard grammar to understand because we know what the present simple is. We know what the past simple is. We know what the future simple is. It's just the basic way to give some information about what is happening in your life in the past, present, or future. So past simple, present simple, future simple. But now we have the present perfect. So what does that mean? How can I make sentences in the present perfect? So we're going to talk about this grammar called the present perfect. And hi, Henry, online today. So only me and you today. So hi, Henry. Okay, so present perfect. We use the present perfect. It's when there's an action that happened in the past, but it's continuing until now. So for example, if I say a sentence like, I have lived in Adelaide for 10 years. I have worked for this company for 6 years. I have played soccer for 3 years. So you could see I'm using the verb to have because I said I have, and then I put my action with the ed. I have played, I have spoken, I have watched, I have written, I have lived, I have whatever. So that's what we call the present perfect. Okay, so let's look at some rules before we do the exercises in our book. So I wanted to show you the present perfect. So we use the present perfect. As you can see, it's an action. Okay, so it's an action that started in the past and is still continuing. So still continuing in this moment in time, or maybe it's just recently finished. Okay, so that's how, that's what we have. The present perfect, an action that started in the past and is still continuing to now, to this moment, or just recently finished. But if we have a look at the past simple, if you remember the past simple, it was an action in the distant, the far, far past, and it's a completed, finished action. So if we look at this time, imagine we are here now. So you could see we're here now, and this is the past. That means yesterday, last night, last year. That is the past time. And then the future time, you know, tomorrow, next week, next year. So I am speaking here in this moment. That's why it's called the present. And it's the perfect because we have to use the verb have. So how do we create this sentence? This is it here. So you've got the subject, and then you have to use have if it's I have, we have, or they have, or has. Remember, has is for the subject, he, she, it. And then you have your action, but as you can see, there's an ed. Okay, so this is what we're talking about, the present perfect. So it's sentences, it's an action that happened in the past. Can you see how I put an X? The action happened in the past. So maybe you traveled, you know, you're already in Australia now, but when did you come? Maybe you left your country 1 year ago or 2 years ago. And then it's happening. You can see the line, it's still happening. Maybe it just finished now, or maybe it's still continuing. So let's have a look at some sentences in the present perfect. I have learnt a new language. Okay, that's a present simple, a present perfect sentence. Maybe you can make a negative. If you want to make a negative, you got to add not. So it becomes, I have not, and then whatever action. For example, I have not finished reading this book. I have not traveled to Japan. I have not spoken to Maria. Now, if you heard, I said spoken. There's no ed in the verb spoken, which comes from to speak, because it is an irregular verb. So you remember that irregular means that you've got verbs that don't follow the rule. They have their own ending. So been, forgotten, that comes from the verb to forget. Done, that's from the verb to do. As I said, you've got spoken, written. So you could see, be careful, in the irregular, it breaks the rule. The action does not have an ed ending. Okay, so we know for the negative, we must add not. And just be careful, there's irregular verbs. So I can make a question. So if I want to make a question, I can say, I have to start with the verb have. So for example, have you studied English? Have you sent an email? Have you called Maria? Okay, so I'm using have. But remember, if you're asking someone else, has she or has he done his homework? And we can also add ever. Now, when we add ever, for example, have you ever traveled to Europe? Have you ever driven a motorbike? So when I add ever, it means because I'm asking about things in your life, experiences, activities, things that you do that are very interesting. So ever just means in your whole life, not yesterday or last night or last year. In your whole life, have you ever traveled to Japan? Have you ever tried sushi in your whole life? Not yesterday. I'm not talking about a particular time in the past. In your whole life, all of your life, have you ever done this action? That's what it means. So if we want to answer, we would say never. No, I've never traveled to Japan. No, I've never learnt Japanese. No, I've never eaten sushi. But if you have, you want to say yes, you would say, yes, I have. Yes, I have traveled to Japan. Yes, I have learnt a different language. Yes, I have done my homework. Okay, so you could see this is an example. Have you ever learnt a new language? Okay, so that's how we use the present perfect. So we're asking someone, or we're talking about an action that started in the past and is still continuing. And we don't want to put the time. We don't want to say last night, last year. You're not putting the time. You're just saying, I have, sent someone an email. We don't know when the action happened. Okay, so we don't know when because we didn't say last night or last year. So that's the present perfect. Okay, so if we go to our book, page 119, you could see in the yellow box, the present perfect. We could see some examples. I've learnt the vocabulary for the test. He's invented a new robot. We've discovered a new type of medicine. I haven't done my homework. He hasn't passed the exam. They haven't understood the words. So number 6, are the sentences talking about an action in the past or the present? it's a past. Because you remember I said the action began in the past. So the other sentence is talking about an action in the past. Do we know exactly when the action happened? So do we know exactly when the action happened? No. It doesn't say last night. It doesn't say yesterday. It doesn't say at 6 o'clock. We don't know when the action happened when you use the present perfect. In the present perfect, the main verb in the past participle, what is the auxiliary? So the auxiliary verb is this verb, to have. Okay, because it's like the helper verb. It comes before the main action. Okay, so this is the main action, and this is the auxiliary verb, to have. So let's have a look at number 7 and try and practice our present perfect. So if I said for number 7, the mobile phone, we know because that's an object, it's not a live object. So I need to say the mobile phone has changed our lives forever. It has become a normal part of our everyday life. In fact, most people, because that's plural, most people have forgotten. We can see the irregular verb, forgotten, irregular. It does not have the ed, it breaks the rule. So most people have forgotten what life was like without it. You probably, now it's you, the subject is you, and it's a negative. You probably haven't. Yeah, you probably haven't. You probably haven't called from a public phone, from a public telephone box or a public phone in years. Of course, if you are aged under 25 years, life hasn't changed at all. Phones have, yeah, because plural. Remember, they have, not it has. So phones, you've got to look at your subject. You can see plural. Phones have always been mobile. That means we can move the phone around. So let's have a look at the present perfect here. Has changed, has become, have forgotten, haven't called. Remember, negative, haven't called, hasn't changed, and have always been, have been. Okay, so that's the present perfect. We're talking about an action which happened in the past and it's still continuing. So let's do number 8 and practice using the present perfect. So I have passed all my exams. So I have passed so I have passed all my exams. I'm so happy. So you could see this action started in the past. Tim has, good, because Tim, he has studied. He has studied maths at university. There's nobody in school this week. All the teachers, so remember plural, because all the teachers, our subject is teachers. All the teachers have gone. So have gone, it's an irregular. So all the teachers have gone on holiday. We need to make it a negative. We haven't. We haven't understood. That's an irregular. We haven't understood anything. Can you explain it again in the next lesson? BMW. Now, remember it's singular. So it goes with the he, she, it. BMW has designed. So BMW has designed a new type of car. They're going to sell it next year. Now we need to make it a negative. He hasn't. Yes, he hasn't. And the verb, the main action, he hasn't done. He hasn't done any homework all year. They have forgotten. Yep, that's an irregular, doesn't have the ed. They have forgotten our address. Can you text it to them? I need to make it a negative. Haven't seen Tom. Yep, so I haven't seen Tom this week. Is he on holiday? Okay, so using our present perfect, let's have a look back at the rule. We know we have a subject and then have or has, that's the auxiliary verb. And then the main verb, you put an ed, but be careful, not all verbs have an ed, like been, forgotten, done, spoken, written, taught. Like I have taught English for 10 years because I'm still doing this action. So if I said a sentence like I have taught, that's irregular. It comes from teach. I have taught English for 10 years. So you could see have taught, have learnt. But to make a negative, we add not. I have not spoken to Maria. I have not played that video game. I have not been to Germany. So let's have a look at the box. Have you forgotten his phone number? So we know how to ask questions. We start with the verb to have. So you got to remember the subject. Have you? Because has is only for he, she, it. So have you forgotten his phone number? And we know how to respond. Yes, I have. Or you would say, no, I haven't. So we respond by saying, yes, I have, or no, I haven't. Okay? Has she practiced the piano today? So it's a question. Has, because the subject is she. Has she practiced the piano today? Yes, she has. So it's a positive response. Yes, she has. So remember, if the subject is she, then this must be has. Or no, she, so I need to change the subject, she hasn't. And now we have questions with ever. And as I said, we make a question with ever when we're talking about life experience. So for example, it's to talk about your life or your past experience. So for example, have you ever studied French? Have you ever learnt a new language? And if you want to respond, you say, no, I've never. So only say never when you're asking a question with ever. Okay? So what I'm going to do to make it easier, I'll separate, no, I'll keep the two questions together. Okay, so let's do number 9. We're going to listen. It's just a little audio that we're going to listen, and then you're going to add, it's a conversation, you're going to add what you hear. Okay, so let's do the exercise in number 9. Remember, using the present perfect. Without maybe listening, what can you think it would say? Something, you done your homework? Have you done your homework? So we could see it's have. So have you done your homework? That's how we ask a question. And no, I haven't. Exactly. So it's got a response. We always say no first. No, I haven't. So negative. No, I haven't. And number 2, something, Peter finished his exam. Has Peter finished his exams? Because remember, for he, she, it, Peter is a he. We're asking about Peter. So has Peter finished his exams? And the response is yes, he's finished. So yes, he's finished. Yes, he's finished all of them. And now he's waiting for his results. Number 3, have you ever, because we've already got the verb there, have you ever studied Arabic? Okay, a language, whichever language you want. Remember, we use ever when we're asking about a life experience, like, wow, have you ever traveled to Japan? Have you ever ridden a motorbike? Have you ever done whatever activity, hobby? So have you ever studied Arabic? And to respond, we know when we have ever, we have to say never. So no, I've never studied Arabic. Or you can just stop at no, I've never. Okay, so now that we talked about a lot of grammar, we use the present perfect. Okay, remembering that we know the present perfect is an action that started in the past and maybe it's still continuing or it just finished. Okay, it's not a past, it's not a present, it's not a future, it's not the simple, it's the perfect, the present perfect. So we have to use the verb to have before the main action, and make sure the main action, you add an ed, but be careful because there's some irregular. They just break the rules. They have their own ending. Okay, so that was the present perfect. Let's do an exercise before we continue. So I've got this. It says, have you ever? Okay, so have you ever had a particular experience? So we want to talk about experiences like traveling, learning something new, doing something. Okay, so have you ever? I'll show you some examples. So Eloise says, remember, we want to practice using the present perfect. So you've got to use the verb to have with the main action. So have a look at Eloise's response. She says, I have traveled to the USA before. So remember, the present perfect doesn't tell you when. We don't know when she went. We just know that she did this action in the past. And maybe it just recently finished. We don't know. We don't know when. So she said, I have traveled to the USA before. I was there. It was there that I have become interested in English and have wanted to visit other countries and study this language, which is known worldwide. I had stayed there for 30 days. Now, the only reason she said had is because it's a finished action. But let's look at another example. I have traveled to Argentina while I was studying Spanish. The experience was amazing. Not only did I get to practice my Spanish, but I also got to see and feel the culture, which helped with learning the language. I hope to be there again someday. Okay, so only one sentence that was in the present perfect. I'm going to change this a little bit just to add more of the present perfect. So I have traveled to Argentina. while I was studying Spanish. The experience was amazing. But I also got to see and feel the culture, which has helped me with learning the language. I hope to be there again soon. So I might just add, I have continued to learn the language. I've continued to learn Spanish since and hope to be there again someday. Okay? Another example is from Javiera. And Javiera says, I have tried Asian food in Australia. It was very different to what I have ever eaten before. At first, I was under the impression that it was only sushi, but I tasted so much variety of Asian food that I now really like it. This is from Curly. So Curly says, I have volunteered before. I had volunteered when I was in college, where I joined a volunteering organization to provide services to people in need. I had been involved in various activities, such as helping the elderly, cleaning up the environment, raising money, and so on. Through these activities, I have learned how to care for others and have appreciated what I have more. So you could see he's using his present perfect. Javiera, Yana says, I have traveled to Australia to learn English. It has been a great experience. I have seen wonderful places and met good people. I have been here for 2 years, and I hope I will be here for a long time. And this is Henry's from before. Have you ever traveled by sea? So remember, when we ask a question, we start with the verb. And remember, in the present perfect, we have the verb to have before the main action. So have you ever traveled by sea? I have traveled by boat before. I had traveled for a few days. Being at sea felt like I was floating. It was a very wonderful experience. I saw the vast sea and was surrounded by water and more water. So sometimes when you use the present perfect, it can also be used with the past simple, because the action, remember, it did happen in the past. So it's very easy to change the sentence from the present perfect to the past simple, because they go together. They go together. Okay, so now you are going to write about your experiences. What have you done? What amazing experience did you do? Maybe you're still doing it. Maybe it's an action that just recently finished. So that's why we say, have you ever? When we ask about someone's experience, we want to know if they have done this. Okay, so you're going to write about your experience. What have you done?